You're listening to Release Your Resistance with Bex Beltran, episode 83. Welcome to Release Your Resistance. This is Bex. The only reason why any of us don't have what we want in life is because of our own resistance. Right now, I'm learning how to recognize and release my resistance, and this podcast tells you how you can release your resistance so that you can live the exact life that you want. Let's get started. Last week, one of my journaling prompts was, what new practices or interests have changed my life in the past 3 or 4 years? That's a pretty good prompt, right? So I started thinking. 4 years ago was 2017. What did I start doing that year? What about the next year? What new thing did I get interested in last year or the year before? I like to organize things, so I made some headings in my journal for each year, and I started to fill in what I could remember. And that was such an interesting memory exercise. At first, it was a little difficult to think about the specific years and what I started when, but pretty soon my mind warmed up to it, and I got really curious and engaged in thinking about this super interesting topic. And the topic has stayed with me and popped up for me in other ways over the past week or so. I really recognized how much my own life has transformed in the past 5 years, and I thought about the other people in my life and how their lives have transformed. And I started noticing discussions and social media posts about transformations that happen over a 5-year span. I collected a few comments that I read from other people about what has happened for them in the past 5 years in order to share them with you here today. So here are a few of the lightly edited quotes that might remind you or inspire you or give you something to consider about your own recent 5-year time frame. One person wrote, "I was doing everything right. Despite feeling taken advantage of, someone I admire told me to stop being a pushover and demand my worth." Yes. Another person wrote, "People will never change and I have to just accept it and not stress myself out talking about something that lowers my mental health." Wow, what a great thing to recognize. A third person wrote, "I'm so much more sure of myself and what I want. I stopped settling for a life that society had planned out for me." Yes. Another person wrote, "I am more confident in not just my abilities, but myself. I understand what I'm worth and what I'm willing to exchange for my time." Another one was, "I realized I was too critical of myself, and now I'm working to stop that, and my self-confidence has shot up." And finally, someone said, "I developed self-esteem, gained body confidence, got a handle on my mental health, learned countless new skills, and experienced more than I ever expected I would." Wow, those sound like amazing transformations, right? And even though I do not personally know any of those people that I quoted, I am so proud of them and I am so happy for the life that they have created for themselves in the past 5 years. By the way, are we just calling this the last 5 years? I wondered if we have a specific name to identify a 5-year span. I don't think we collectively do in the English language, but we should, right? So I came up with a few options, and you will have to let me know which one you prefer. We could call it a demi-decade, since 5 years is half of a decade, or we could call it 5 ans. That's French for 5 years. What do you think? Do you have another name suggestion? 5 years might seem like a long time, but also it seems like it passes in an instant. And as I just shared all of those examples, a whole life, a whole personality can completely change in 5 years. And this reminds me of a coaching exercise that I sometimes do with my coaching clients. I ask them to list 4 to 5 things that they have learned or created or completed or accomplished in the past 1 or 2 years. And then I invite them to think of the quote unquote you of 5 years ago. So then we talk about how that 5-year before person created and learned and accomplished all those things that they had listed. And then we push our conversation into the future and wonder what they will learn, create, complete, and accomplish in the next 5 years. Even if they're not aware of it yet, or even if they don't know how yet, or don't have the resources or the confidence yet. It is such a powerful coaching exercise, and it's very encouraging and empowering for the client and also for me as the coach to hear about all of it and to see and believe all the possibilities for that person. So I decided to run through this coaching exercise on myself with a few variations so that I could share it with you. And I also wanted to think about some of the struggles or unknowns that I have encountered over the past 5 years. This episode isn't meant to just be a memoir of the last 5 years of my life. It's not supposed to be all about me, but I am sharing all of my own information with you so you can hear some real life examples. And in case, or hopefully, they will relate to you, or maybe you can hear one of the examples and use it as a metaphor for something in your life. So let's go back to 2016. How was my life in 2016? What was I doing? That year was my year of learning and realization and growth. I think that really was the year that my life began to take a serious turn. It was my last year of working full-time in a corporate environment and working as a traditional employee. And during that last year of my traditional former career was when I discovered and incorporated all of these concepts that changed my life. And I described those 6 concepts that changed my life in one of my earliest episodes last year. All of those practices and ideas and habits came to me right around the same time during 2016. So I will link that episode in the show notes so that you can go and hear what those 6 concepts are. You can just go to bexby.org/demidecade. That's DEMI, no space, no dash, DECADE. So DEMIDECADE, demidecade, to listen or to read. I didn't know at that time what all of those changes would mean for me in the future. What I did know was that I had learned how to lose weight. I had taught myself a new skill. Basically, I had learned about the power of managing my mind. I started to get a glimpse of my own intuition. I started to consider that I could design the life that I wanted instead of living by default. And I realized how abundant my life was. I learned about the brilliance of decluttering and minimalism, and all of those things just really put me in a position to change everything the next year, starting in 2017. By the end of 2016, I think I knew that my corporate career was coming to a close and that I would be on the lookout for my next thing, whatever that next thing was. At the time, I had no idea. I thought that maybe it would have something to do with tarot, and because I loved learning about business and entrepreneurship, I thought maybe I would be doing my own business. I started my quick entry journal sometime in 2016 or 2017. Isn't that crazy to think that I was not journaling daily back then? And I started taking daily pictures of myself in that time frame because I wanted to be able to see my own visual transformation. And around that time, I was also taking watercolor courses, and that really helped me start to consider myself as an artist. I guess my struggle that year, even though 2016 was such a great year for me and I had so much learning, so much positive transformation, the struggle was that I really was unhappy in my work situation and I wanted something else, but I was afraid of voluntarily giving up my security and comfort and the familiar in order to step into the unknown. Starting in 2017, I was working at a few contract positions and I was still in the mode of trying to figure out who I was and what I wanted and what I was going to do. I went to a life coach school event and I met other people who were completely immersed in self-coaching and on their way to becoming coaches. And that was the year that I really solidified my intentional Zumba routine. And I knew that I intended to go to a Zumba class somewhere every single morning. I think that was also the year that I decided to do something new each week because I was trying to expand my horizons. So I would comb through event calendars and meetup boards and look for announcements of new things that I could go and do and try. And that led me to volunteering at the library for 6 months, and it got me involved in a few active meetup groups. It seems minor now, but 2017 was also the year that I switched from being a PC user to a Mac user, with a Mac as my desktop and then a MacBook as my laptop. And it is so interesting now when I help other people on their computers who are using a PC. It's so foreign to me. But that was just 5 years ago that I made that switch. My struggle in 2017 was feeling a little lost and purposeless, since in the 20 plus years prior to that, I had always tied my identity to my work. And that wasn't really accurate for me in 2017. I was also so afraid of being bored and wasting time, so I ended up committing myself to some things that I didn't really want to do, and then eventually I felt like I had to extricate myself from those things. 2018 was the year that I really started journaling daily. I made it a very conscious and intentional practice to journal every day, and I made specific time in my schedule to have my morning routine. Also in 2018, I started getting regular weekly coaching. Actually, that might have started in 2017, but I specifically remember working weekly with a coach in 2018 to really examine my own thoughts and my own beliefs and make my intentional choices about what I wanted to continue to think. I had already been doing self-coaching on my own, but not in a formal way and not with the help of a certified and trained coach. 2018 was when I really learned about the idea of alignment and attracting what I want for myself. That was new for me and pretty transformational, and it really got me on the bandwagon of thinking about abundance and attraction. 2018 was also when I really started to trust my intuition, not just to do a tarot reading, but I learned to ask my own inner wisdom, not images printed on cardboard, to really give me guidance with my life. And I specifically remember I had decided in 2018 that I was ready to go back to a W-2 job instead of these shorter contract jobs I had been doing, and I really looked for the perfect fit for myself, and I had specific criteria. I only wanted these specific conditions. If the job didn't meet my list, then I didn't want that job. And I found the almost perfect job. It was just so right up my alley, but my intuition told me it was a no. And I was very confused by that. I didn't like actually hearing no because I was so happy to think that my search was over and that I had found my little part-time job that was going to help me overcome some of the things that I thought a part-time job would help me with. But anyhow, my intuition said no. Thankfully, I listened to that no, and I did not take that job. And I unfortunately had to, but now I see why, accept the idea that I would never know why that job was a no, why it wasn't a fit for me. It was disappointing, but I did accept it. And a few months later, I ended up getting the explanation, much sooner than I thought. I found a working environment that was exactly what I wanted. I like to tell people that I manifested the perfect job and coworkers for myself. It literally had everything on my list and gave me so many experiences that I had been curious about or that I had wanted to try that I didn't even think to put on the list because it just seemed so far out there. So many positives came from that experience, and I am just so grateful that I did decline the almost perfect job in order to get the even more perfect job. And the biggest struggle for me in 2018 was what led me to that perfect job. I realized I did not like what I was doing and what I had committed myself to out of fear in 2017. So I decided to pull back from everything. I told myself that I was taking a break to make space for quote unquote, it to come to me. I didn't know what it was, but I wanted to be ready for it. So I cleared everything off of my schedule. And in March of 2018, I was open and ready, and it did not magically appear. So that is why I made that perfect job list and started looking. And now as I look back, I can see I was pretty impatient. I just expected myself to get what I wanted within a month of clearing my schedule. But everything also unfolded exactly as it was supposed to. In the later part of 2018, thanks to a breakthrough session with my coach, I wrote my manifesto and I found my purpose, as I like to call it, through writing that manifesto. So I did end up finding, quote unquote, it in 2018, just many months later than I thought I would. And just having that manifesto and finding that purpose and labeling it that way and putting a name to it and reading it to myself and being so intentional about it was life-changing. My mood changed, my demeanor changed, my confidence skyrocketed. Writing that manifesto just opened me up so much in a way that I wasn't able to open before and that I wasn't even aware of before. That whole situation was just so amazing. In 2019, that perfect little part-time job that I had manifested turned into a full-time job with more responsibility and better use of my skills, and obviously taking up much more of my time. And that is also the year that I started my coach certification program. I was learning so much. I was studying. I was coaching with my practice clients. This was a very robust program, and I took it very seriously. And I still had so much fun, but my life was pretty busy at that time, working full-time, doing the coach certification program, having an active social life, working on a bathroom remodel, all of it. And halfway through 2019, I knew I would be starting this podcast in 2020. And I was having so much fun planning for it and researching and learning how to start a podcast. I also was starting to realize that my time at that perfect job would be coming to an end. I wasn't sure when, but I was thinking about my exit. I was able to drop back down to part-time, and that meant that I also had a full weekday free for myself each week that I used for coaching my practice clients, and I used it for content creation and training and networking. I had a lot of normal struggles in 2019 that I think all full-time employees who are also going to school or starting a side hustle might have. The question that I remember being really captivated by, not so much a struggle, but just something that I thought about a lot that year, was wondering, what would be the worst thing that someone could say about you? I loved thinking about that question for myself and asking my friends and family. And I also always brought it up if there was extra time in a coaching session. I just wanted to hear everyone's different answers to that question and then dissect those different answers with them. It was like a bullet train to the very center of their subconscious to learn what they thought the worst thing someone could possibly say about them was. Obviously, 2020 was a major transformative year for, I think, every person on this planet, probably, but I'll just speak for myself. I was just so fully reminded of the truth that we really have control of nothing. And even if we make the best laid plans and have the most prepared preparations, none of it really matters. Reality is always in control. We are not in control of reality, and certainly we are not in control of the future. So 2020 was a great transformational lesson for me. Everything that I thought was going to happen, everything that I thought I was going to do, it didn't really pan out the way that I thought it would. Probably not for me or for anyone, but 2020 was such a wonderful time for me. It really was. I was able to meet so many people online that I probably wouldn't have been encouraged to meet or put in a position to meet if online wasn't our only option. I definitely deepened my friendships with people that I had met in the previous few years. 2020 was also the year that we decided to move, so that was a huge transformation. We moved out of a house that we had been living in for 13 years. We renovated a house that my husband had had from before we were married, and we moved into that house prior to the renovation being complete, and I have shared a lot about that process on this podcast. My 2020 struggles were so minor compared to so many other people, and I do recognize how lucky I was and still am. I would say one of the biggest lessons that I personally learned in 2020 because of all the unexpected changes was to create what I want for myself. When I couldn't go to Zumba anymore, I figured out how to get what I wanted for myself. When I realized I wouldn't be able to host classes and workshops, I started meetups and Facebook groups to meet new people and hosted everything online instead of in person. So what am I doing and thinking and expecting here now in 2021? Well, thanks to 2020, I have learned not to expect anything. I am really trying not to expect or plan for anything or to guarantee myself that things will happen a certain way. I am trying to be very, very open. And if you've been following me, you know that 2021 is the year that I found surrender. That has been my pet passion and project, and learning and studying about it this year. And if you would have told me back in 2016 that 5 years from now I would be diving deep into the subject of surrender, I would have been very surprised and maybe also confused. And especially if you would have told me that 4 years out I would have been diving into the subject of resistance, I would have also been surprised and confused. It is interesting to think that these topics have come into my awareness and made such an impact and been such an important part of my life over the last 2 years, first with resistance and now with surrender. And I don't even think I had heard the phrases or given any thought to those concepts 5 years ago. And now that I am in 2021 and have been self-employed for over a year and almost a year and a half now, and my current outlook is something that I would not have expected. The most interesting thing to me that I struggle with now is work-life balance. And I struggle with it now like I never did before. I never struggled with work-life balance when I was working for someone else. But now that I'm working for myself, I find myself working a lot more than I want to or need to. And when I'm not working, I find myself thinking that I should be working and that I shouldn't be relaxing. And then I feel guilty for not enjoying my relaxing time. So this struggle with work-life balance has been a big surprise that has really come to light for me in 2021. What else about my life now would the 5-year-ago version of me not even imagine? That struggle with the work-life balance, obviously, my fascination with surrender and resistance. The 5-year-ago me probably would have been surprised that I am doing this podcast because I was into listening to podcasts in 2016 and 2017 and all the time in between. So a podcast makes a lot of sense. The The coaching makes a lot of sense too, because 5 years ago, I was just being introduced to it and trying coaching out for myself. I would never have guessed 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 1 year ago, or even 6 months ago that I would be designing and selling notebooks. That has been a really fun and creative departure from what I thought I would be doing. So what about 5 years from now? What about the future? The 2026 Bex? What is she going to think about what I am doing right now, what I am experiencing? By then, I will have known about surrender and resistance for 5 or 6 years. It will probably be old school to me by then. I will have experienced whatever the arc is of this notebook creation track that I am on. Maybe my notebook shop will only have lasted 6 months. Maybe I'll be creating something else by then. Maybe I'll be creating apps for new technologies, or who knows what. It's just so interesting to think about what the future might hold, what might be available, what technology that we'll have access to that we cannot even imagine right now. How fun and interesting to think about. Now that I've recapped my last 5 years, what do you think? As with all of my other topics that I've shared with you, I am so curious about your reaction and your thoughts about all of this. Do you have any resistance to going backwards 5 years and itemizing what you have learned, what you have experimented with, and what your struggles were? Can you see how your results today were grounded in things you realized or tried out or thought about 5 or 3 years ago, or even just 6 months ago? And I am so interested in this topic that I decided to dig into other people's most recent 5-year experiences too, to see if my theory that our entire lives can transform in a demi-decade or a 5 ans. I think I like demi-decade. Anyhow, I'm curious if it holds true for other people too. So next week, I will be interviewing a friend of mine who has had a pretty life-changing few years recently too, and we will look for some commonalities and differences to see what we learn. Let me know what you think about demi-decades or 5 ans or 5 years. Let me know what transformations you have been through or what resistance you have overcome. I want to hear all about it. Leave me a comment in the show notes at bexby.org/demi-decade, DEMIDECADE, or shoot me an email at hi@bexby.org. Thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to share my interview with you next week, and I will talk to you then. Bye-bye. This has been Release Your Resistance. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, think about someone who you know who would love this episode and share it with them. There should be a share button on your app if you're listening to this on your phone. If you'd like to continue this conversation one-on-one or in real time, come visit me on my site at bexby.org to see how we can work together.